This is the DRS train.
I feel so free. I'm Peter Brook. I'm joined by Nedso's F1 Gridbox, and you're listening to the DRS Train podcast. So Formula One is back after another 4-week break with the United States Grand Prix at COTA. It's a great circuit. The race was generally pretty good. And now that we're in the tail end of the season, we're getting to the point where everything that happens has kind of major ramifications for the championship. And this race, I think you'd agree, was no exception.
Yeah, I think that's pretty obvious. It was pretty much agreed before the weekend came about that Lando needed to make gains on Max like he hasn't done for the entire season, and he just didn't. I made a comparison in a couple of servers, and I think I might have done it on Twitter at one point, that Lando is like 1986 era Nigel Mansell, just without the talent and without the charisma. He just seems to bottle it at every opportunity and doesn't do enough to get into. He's in a perfect situation. He gets a decent start, and then he just goes nowhere with it.
Yeah, he's impressing me less and less because we've gone from, say, 2020 and 2021 when we had last lap Lando and all of that. And that sort of exuberance has gone. He used to be this sort of the young, energetic kind of one that didn't really care about just trying to impress everyone and was very kind of bold in his moves and everything. And now he's just crumbling under what is relatively little pressure because it shouldn't be this difficult to take the title in that car when they've had a car that good for such a long time. And we've seen it again this weekend, is that he made things so much harder for himself. Admittedly, it seems that neither of those teams had the fastest car this weekend, but he's come out of it and Max has increased his lead when Lando really needs to be eating into it in every weekend, and he's just not doing that.
Yeah, I think we were discussing before we went live that he needs to be gaining like 10 or 12 points per race, and that means that Max has got to finish off the podium in every single race from now, and he's got to win. He's not even winning the races, never mind getting Max to finish off the podium. He's not going to do this unless Max gets like a retire, because this is the main thing about modern F1. You don't really get retirements, especially from the leaders, unless they blow up into each other. Unless Max retires, I think this is a done deal in the championship. I don't think that there's any way Lando can come back under any normal circumstances and just by racing Max wheel to wheel.
Yeah, and I think a retirement from Max is unlikely because the one he had in Australia in the year, that was technically a reliability issue, but I think that was more someone had done something wrong on the car on the grid rather than something is just broken because of wear and tear. So a mechanical failure is very unlikely. He almost never crashes as well, so that's probably not going to happen. Whereas with Lando, McLaren's reliability is perfect, but he is much more mistake prone. Of the two, he's the one that's more likely to crash. And it's like you're just waiting for that moment because you know as soon as it happens, then it's done. Even if Max crashes with him, like just neutralizing the points lead is not enough with only 5 races left.
Yeah. Maybe we could see a Prost and Senna moment from like 1989 where the leader crashes into the other guy to neutralize the points lead. But I don't think Max even needs to do that because even today, Lando's had chances to get back to extend his points lead, and not today, but yesterday, and he just didn't. There was like sometimes with drivers who struggle to get championship challenges underway or not everything goes their way, you see at least an inkling of fight. You see something there that says, you know what, this guy has the potential. He's just not executed it 100% of the time. He's executed it 50%, 70% of the time. But with Lando, it's as if the car speeds and stuff, where their car were in terms of performance, is reversed. It's as if Max has the best car and Lando has the second best based on how they've been performing this year. It's just, I haven't seen a driver bottle a title this hard since Damon Hill. Not personally, obviously, but since Damon Hill in 94 or 95.
Yeah, it's very similar to that. It's kind of Prost and Senna, but if Senna was mid and had 4 wins instead of 41 and no championships, that's kind of how it would go.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we should get going as ever, going team by team. So we'll leave those two asides for the moment and talk about the winners of this weekend, which surprised everyone, which is Ferrari. They were in the sprint, the pace was there or thereabouts, even though Max that won it. But then in the race, they suddenly get this very dominant 1-2, which basically came out of nowhere, and they put in one of the strongest weekends they've had in a very long time. Those just commanding from the lead. Neither driver made any mistakes. The strategies worked, although to be honest, fucking up a one stop is pretty hard, even for Ferrari. Yeah, they're really, really impressing me at the moment, and they're within grasp of taking second from Red Bull in the constructors, and there is even the potential that they could take first from McLaren.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Ferrari have had bursts of pace in random races, like Monaco. They were the fastest guys. I can't think of other races where they were particularly the first fastest car because my brain just doesn't go that far. But Kota isn't a track you'd expect that on, because obviously Monaco's a street circuit. I think they were good there because of their suspension settings or something like that. It was because they were less stiff over the bumps and stuff like that. But Kota isn't a track I'd expect them to be good at, because it's not a very unique circuit. It's more balanced than anything, because although you have a fat long straight, you have about 5 million tight and really difficult corners. So it's a balanced circuit. It's not a particularly standout track in terms of characteristics, and that's what surprises me. It's obviously not just Leclerc being a hero, because Sainz is there in second place. I don't know what's that, especially considering they had no form in qualifying. It was a different team that seemed to be up at the top in qualifying.
Yeah, I mean, this circuit has quite a good mixture of high and low speed and the long straight and everything. It's always been quite a bumpy one. What does seem to have affected things this weekend is that they resurfaced it and they smoothened a lot of stuff out. And we saw from practice onwards that there was very little grip. Lewis Hamilton nearly had a massive accident in FP1. There were a few other spinners in the race itself. We had spinners, quite a few at turn 1, which was very interesting. But something just kind of clicked, and I'm not sure what. But of the two, Leclerc in general has really impressed me this year, and it's a shame that just because of those flops in Austria, Canada, and Silverstone, that is what's keeping him out of this title fight. When even if he wasn't on the podium, if he'd just been in the points, he'd be ahead of Lando in the standings, and he'd be the one chasing Max for the title and doing a far better job of it, I must say as well.
Yeah, regarding those early season races, I mean, Silverstone is the one that stands out to me, obviously, because I think he was like 13th. But from what I remember, that was just a ballsy strategy call in the changeable conditions. The other ones, I don't really remember exactly what happened, so I'm not going to make any much comment. But I don't remember him actually having major fault in terms of where his positions were.
No, none of this was his driving. It was all strategy, actually, because Canada was a double retirement, but even before then, he had pitted. He'd put the wrong tires on, and and stayed on them, and then he ended up like a lap down when it rained. It was something like that, and then I think they just gave up. Something went wrong with Sainz's car. In Austria, he missed the cut in Q1. I think he got knocked out in Q1. Just missed that he got stuck in the pit lane for too long and ran out of time to do his lap. And then he just didn't make up any progress in the race. They did a stupid strategy. And then Silverstone, they put him on inters when it was still dry, and instead of pitting him again, they were like, "Oh no, we'll stay on these because the rain is coming." And it's like, yeah, but once the rain has come, first of all, your inters will not be inters anymore, and also you're losing 12 seconds per lap to everyone else. Like this is where this is the thing about like, this is what's infuriating, is that every team is utterly clueless on how to do wet weather strategies. It's like, just hire me for this. It's like, okay, pit them. It's not raining. Okay, pit them again immediately. Put them back on slits, because they're going to lose a lot more time than that if they stay out when it's like this. And yeah, it was just those 3 races. That was enough to take him out of this fight, really. And it could happen, but it's highly unlikely. But even so, it looks like things for him are going really well, and mentally he's in a very good place because the team are not being so useless. But Carlos, his weekend was fine. I mean, yeah, he finished second behind Charles. He had some minor problems that they managed to fix on the steering wheel. I think that he was concerned he might retire at one point because he said he could smell leaking fuel. but that went to nothing. And then they told him to change some setting on the steering wheel that he didn't understand, and also nobody else watching understood either. And then in the sprint race, he took second from Lando on the final lap, and beat Charles. So he's had I mean, Singapore and Azerbaijan were not brilliant for him, but yeah, otherwise he's been driving very hard and making a point to prove, even though he knows he's going to Williams next year.
Yeah. I do believe, the Ferrari. I mean, especially that's a good point you made about Charles and the fact that his bad results this season have not come from errors, which we couldn't say the same about him 1, 2, or 3 in his previous seasons. So it's good to see that he is finally. I don't think he's fully rubbed off the notion of him being a qualifying merchant, because I think he's still definitely much better in qualifying than he is in the races. But it's not like his races are detrimentally or awful or bad. It's just that they're kind of up to a level you'd expect of a driver of his caliber.
Yeah.
And Science is just, he's bang average with a couple of decent performances here and there in terms of, like, I'd say he's a solid B tier driver with a couple of A tier races sprinkled in the mix. Whereas Charles is a kind of A tier driver who's got S tier races sprinkled in the mix, races like this.
With those two, the balance seems to shift from year to year, because there are some years where they're very even, and then other years where Charles is just much further ahead, such as 2022, for example, where Carlos had a lot of dodgy races. But also, I mean, Leclerc has just been super consistent this year. Because looking at his results, there's what, 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 4th, 4th, 3rd, 3rd, 1st, retired, 5th, 11th, 14th, 4th, 3rd, 3rd, 1st, 2nd, 5th, and 4th. So in, quote unquote, normal races, he's always been top 5.
Yeah.
So yeah, really super consistent. He hasn't really had, other than those 3 howlers, none of these have really been races where he's done anything particularly wrong or particularly badly. It's just that for the first part of the season, Red Bull were the fastest car, and now it's McLaren. And so he hasn't had the fastest car at any point, but he's just been kind of running in the middle while Max and Lando are going up and down like this, and it's kind of averaging out like that. But at the moment, he is my contender probably for driver of the season. But some people I imagine will disagree. But yeah, he's really impressing me at the moment.
I mean, I wouldn't put him as driver of the season. I think he's close, but I wouldn't put him there, at least not just yet. But yeah, it's a strange one with Ferrari, because, as you said, they are, like, Charles especially has been consistent, and then Ferrari, meanwhile, Ferrari as a whole team, they went from the start of the season definitely the second quickest team. Then as McLaren got good and Mercedes kind of got good in the mid-season, they were 4th quickest, and now they're crawling back up to 3rd quickest, close to Red Bull now, I'd say. And the whole top 4 has yo-yoed the entire season, whether it be Mercedes, McLaren, Ferrari, or Red Bull.
Yeah, it's what's made the season so good. When you think about how this season began, and everyone was like despairing after Bahrain, at like, oh god, we are just picking up where we left off, which is what I predicted. And then we were distracted for a couple of races with the Horny Horner scandal, which has just disappeared as if it never happened. It's insane how quickly that's gone under the radar. And then from Miami onwards, suddenly it seems the first domino to fall was Max hitting that bollard under the overpass in Miami, and it's just been downhill from there on for him. But yeah, it's made it so close, but also even in a season this long, it's too little too late, because normally any other season by now would have finished already and Max would be champion. But even with this extra 5 or 6 races, it's still not enough for them to catch up to him. Which is nuts, because but then he's had a couple of crap races, but in general he is outdriving that car like mad, especially compared to his teammate. Yeah, which I guess brings us to Red Bull, because Max finished 3rd in the race. Yeah, he was just, I mean, at the beginning he qualified 2nd, but then in qualifying everyone was saying, oh, an amazing well-deserved pole lap for Lando. But Max was on course to beat it and would have taken pole had George not crashed right at the end. So because he went purple in sector 1 and green sector 2, Lando was yellow in sector 1, so he wasn't going to improve. So yeah, he probably would have taken pole position. And then yeah, he has the inside from starting from 2nd at the start. Tries to take the lead at the start. They both run wide, and then through goes Leclerc. But his driving, yeah, I mean, he was pretty chill and relaxed, I guess, because even though he had both Ferraris ahead of him, because again, Sainz passed him, so that the Ferraris are clearly faster on race pace. He didn't enjoy the hard tyre though, and then Lando closed in, but he showed very mature kind of defensive driving, knew where to place the car, knew when to use the battery. And whereas Lando behind him was being very erratic and nearly caused a big accident at turn one once he had got ahead of him and then got the penalty. So yeah, that's the thing. Max is he's really chill at the moment, because even though he's on the back foot, he's not really on the back foot.
Yeah, but one thing that really annoyed me watching him and Lando battle and that whole situation was that Lando was just completely oblivious to Max's traditional move, which is to go diagonally into the apex from the outside of a corner, and he just seemed to forget that even existed. That's Max's signature move. You're on the outside of a corner. If it's for example Austin turn one, you're on the outside of a corner. It's probably going to be inverted in my camera, but you go from one side of a track, you diagonally go right to the apex, and you get to the apex first, and then you go wide. I don't know why drivers don't just either A, cover off the inside, or B, go for the biggest switchback you've ever seen in your life. Lando has no racecraft.
Yeah, I mean, it took him 10 laps to pass him. He should have really done it on the first attempt, because he kept messing up the first. I mean, in the first sector, because of those kind of corners and because of dirty air, you will lose time. But then he was messing up his exit of turn whatever onto the main straight. Wasn't close enough, and then when he was close enough, he wasn't taking the right line. He was trying something different each time. But he was in a faster car on newer tyres, so it shouldn't really have taken him that long. And then he does get past him, runs off track. I mean, the angles they showed for that, I was thinking, he is ahead, but he's also gone off track. And it's like, well, does that count as gaining an advantage? But then could you argue that Max pushed him off at the same time? It's this has been an issue all weekend, another weekend beset with constant issues around track limits. Because of the way the circuit is designed, with the endless runoff and the corners, those very sharp turns that encourage dive bombs, it was almost nobody was able to pull off overtakes in both races without pushing someone wide and off the track. They took it very wide there, but it was just, it was just annoying that it kept having to be that way.
Yeah, it's just the profile of some of these corners. There are just corners, like for example, I think it's turn 12 at the end of that straight. I'm not entirely sure about numbers, but the sharp left-hander at the end of a long DRS straight. There are some corners. Most of the only overtaking spots on the track, because they're two hairpins. The onus is on the defending driver to be able to just do whatever, especially if he's on the inside. If the defending driver, with the current track limit regulations, if the defending driver doesn't want you to overtake, he can just push you off the track and you cannot overtake. There is no way for you to overtake without getting penalised. So if the driver wants to do it, they can just force you off, and I don't think that's fair. I think that there should be some extra. Either A, they should just replace runoffs with grass and gravel. I get the importance of runoffs about how it allows drivers to make, or if they make a mistake, it doesn't completely ruin their race, that kind of stuff. But I do think that there are some limitations to it, and I think there should be, like, even if it's to go with the but the Paul Ricard runoffs, where you can run off and not lose a lot, but you still lose it in terms of like tyre wear, for example, where it's abrasive surface and it cuts through your tyres. Either that, or just go into grass and gravel, or the gravel stripes we had in Austria, the little thin slices that they put on the exit of the track. Because this is the problem, when you have a driver getting forced off, especially, well, let's use the Lando Max example, it's hard to, like, we're debating it. It's hard to figure out whether Lando gained an advantage by going off track. If you put a gravel strip there and Max forces him off there, it's very obvious he's been forced into the gravel. He's lost a lot of time, because he would lose a lot of time. I think that should be put in place, either grass and gravel just the whole way around, or gravel strips to stop people from just forcing other drivers off the track when they want to, because they don't want to have it be overtaken.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of corners here where you could use that, because it does. The thing is, it does have gravel, as Lewis showed off to us, but it's behind an avalanche of runoff first. Yeah. And there is obviously, when it comes, this goes for any circuit. High speed corners, no, you can't have gravel for obvious reasons. But yeah, turn 12, you could have gravel on the exit of it. So not like looking straight ahead and to the right, because we've had accidents there in the past. But on the exit, yes, put gravel, because that's where everyone was going wide. And that's not a point that if you're going to crash, you're going to end up there. And because it's the exit, it's very slow. So that's easy to deal with. Yes. Turn 1 is it makes no difference almost no difference in turn 1, because that corner is so wide. Once you get up to the track widens enormously. Their first sector, that's no good. Turn 11, yes, you can do it, although no one ever overtakes there. Yeah, there are loads of opportunities. But yeah, like you said, the strips they have at Austria, which again, every circuit should have, is that first of all, the rumble strip should not be wider than the car, and there should be a strip of your grass or gravel immediately behind it, and then you can put the runoff or whatever or it is. Yeah. Or all runoff should be replaced with the abrasive runoff that Paul Ricard has without the seizure-inducing stripes.
Yeah.
Because that, as well as slowing the cars down, it also massively wears the tires out. So it's a double whammy, like something like that. It just shouldn't be as much of an issue.
Yeah, it would make racing a lot better, because then we're not worried about, oh, is that pass going to be docked for track limits? We know what has happened when it's happened. It's like with VAR in football, you wait in 5 minutes to find if a goal's actually been scored. In F1, it'd be like we don't have to wait 5 minutes to check if they're going to get noted by the FIA for an overtake that they've done. Just make the onus on like a definite basis, like, because obviously now it's the steward's discretion as to whether your overtake is legal. If you just put it so there's a gravel strip there that is very obvious, and if you just put the track limits to wherever, don't put a track limit there. If you want to go all the way up to the gravel and risk it, you can do. But if you dip a wheel on, you're going to lose time.
Yeah. And it's like trying to determine what counts as an advantage and what doesn't is difficult, because it's quite on that kind of corner. It's very marginal to say, oh well, he'd be half a second closer if he hadn't done it like that.
Yeah.
Because I guess you can widen your exit, but then you're taking a longer arc to get back on the track and that. It was interesting from turns 13, 14, and 15, we saw a lot of people trying moves there, which you don't normally see. And I think a lot of that was, again, the low grip that was happening as people were messing up the braking and that. Those two, again, Lando tried a couple of moves on Max there that didn't pay off. But yeah, those have never been corners you really expect to see overtakes on.
I think it's because the entry to, especially the one that looks like Bahrain turn 910, is so wide and the entry is so narrow that you can send it up the inside of someone. And it's a much shorter distance than the actual racing line to just send it up the inside of someone into, I don't know what the actual name of the corner is. I think it's turn
15.
Yeah, turn 15. You can send it up the inside there, and as long as you can not go off track on the exit, you're fine. I like those sets of corners because it is an extra characteristic. It promotes overtaking by making the entry wider than the exit, because it means that the racing line is much slower on the entry than an overtaking line would be.
But yeah, it was just a bit annoying as well, because the penalty came on the final lap, and so Lando, he tried to step on it to get 5 seconds ahead. That didn't work. He was annoyed partly because he got the penalty, but also I think he was annoyed that the team just didn't tell him to give the place back immediately.
Yeah,
because then he could. I mean, because yes, he could have tried again, but what's to say he would have even got past him again? But the end result of that is that Max has increased his lead by 5 points. Because even if Lando had passed him, he would have only gained 1 point on him. So it was like, I was watching it and I was like, to be honest, there's nothing much at stake here, because he's only ever going to gain a point on him, or he'll crash and the championship's over, or they'll both crash and we're back to square one. It was just not, there was not much to say really with that. But in the sprint, I was annoyed. The sprint format is still just stupid, because I was thinking after sprint quali and then the sprint race, it's like, okay, well now we know where everyone stands in terms of pace, and this is what we can see in the race again. Like, they need different tires, I feel like, to make that really work. Like, maybe just bring back Bridgestones just for the sprints, because otherwise it's like, well, now we know what's going to happen in the race, which for the most part was correct. I mean, the Ferraris did better in the actual race than the sprint, but yeah, we just don't need the sprints at all.
I mean, one thing I think I suggested this in my I can't remember what video it was, but I suggested making an actual sprint tire, so it's designed to do like 100 kilometers and no more, so that you can put, and it's one that you can actually push on, so it's like a harder compound, but you can actually push on it, and it gives good grip.
Just a Pirelli option tire. That's basically not Pirelli, Michelin. A Michelin option tire, something like that. Just you can push on, and then you hit 20 laps and it goes or whatever. Because otherwise we're not. It defeats the purpose of having only one practice session, because then the race and quali become the practice sessions.
Yes.
For the actual race. Max, he drove fine, pretty chill weekend. He outdrove the car, which you could definitely say when you see what Checo did, because he did his usual thing. He barely scraped into Q3. He qualified 9th. He spent 20 laps up behind Tsunoda, who is competing to take his seat from him. He eventually got past him, and then he got passed by George, and he finished 7th. Only 40 seconds behind Max or something.
That's like that's like 8/10 a lap. That's a bit horrendous. I can't lie.
Yeah, it's just there is no he's becoming superfluous in this constructors battle, because he alone is costing them possibly even second place now, as well as the title. And he keeps saying, yes, I'm going to be here next year, and it's like it's not quite that simple, because Helmut Marko, who apparently can't shut up, has openly said to Liam Lawson, "You're auditioning for that seat next year." I'm guessing he said the same to Tsunoda, but then Tsunoda had a train wreck of a race, so he hasn't helped himself. Yeah. But there's no incentive. I mean, next week is just going to be annoying in Mexico, because everything is going to be all about him, unless they have planned his retirement announcement or whatever. Maybe we'll see what we saw last year, and he crashes again at the start.
Yeah. I mean, if there's any race where he's going to quote unquote prove himself, it's that one. I mean, he did it. He did it at Sakhir 2020. He basically saved his entire career by winning that race. So maybe it's going to happen again. I mean, obviously, I don't think it will do. But can you imagine the scenes if Lando finally gets past Max, but he's got Perez in front of him and he doesn't win?
Yeah, which it seems that there's almost anything that can stop Lando from winning at this point. Another thing with Red Bull that we had going into the weekend was when there's reports of an indiscriminate number of teams had protested against a team for having some illegal ride height thing that they could change between races. And then guess what? I was thinking, okay, so this is either McLaren or Red Bull, and guess what? It's Red Bull. But that's apparently, I think they were shown demonstrating it to like scrutineers to say, no, this is legal or whatever. Yeah. I don't entirely understand what it is, but I think their argument is that, well, that's basically violating parc fermé and giving them a huge advantage in the races. And it's like, well, is it really? Like, this time a year ago, I would have believed you, but it's clearly not working well for them at the moment, if that's the case. But then McLaren have had something about, well, them actually, plus loads of other teams have had to adjust their, illegal flexing DRS flat wing bollocks or whatever. And so, well, maybe I'm sure that's been helping them as too, because since they had to get rid of that after Baku, it's taken the edge off a little bit, I guess.
Yeah. I do think their advantage has gone, as at least halved. I think before it was probably like maybe a 3/10, 4/10 advantage. Now it's closer to 1 or 2. It's not as much as it was, but Norris is still in the fastest car on the grid. Yeah, when we were talking about like the ride heights and stuff, I was just thinking back to the 1980s. People were like, "Oh my god, this is like, oh my god, what a team adjusting the ride height between weekends, midway through the race." I'm like, Brabham were doing this in the 80s. They were getting hydropneumatic suspension and just going yeet as soon as they went out on track with the ground effect cars.
And the thing is, they didn't get penalised for that. They were told stop using it, but they weren't said, "Oh, we're disqualifying you for all the other races." So it stuck, even though they eventually decided it was illegal. Because I mean, back then it was considerably easier to exploit loopholes because the rules were so much less restrictive that you could do that. But it's like, it's obviously not working. It's not something nearly as brazen as Ferrari's illegal engines in 2019, where everyone was just like, what the fuck is this? When that pace came out of nowhere. And then they went back to where they were. I love the way that Max was like, I think it got to Kota, and he was like, why do you think Red Bull are Ferrari are less competitive? And he's like, well, they're not cheating anymore. Like, just says it how it is. But yeah, McLaren, I mean, we've discussed Lando at length quite a bit. I mean, in the sprint, okay, he went from 4th. He tried to take the lead at the start. I missed that because I thought the sprint was an hour later than it was. But then he lost 3rd. Right, the last lap, he lost 2nd to Sainz. So he hasn't helped himself. And now it's gone up to 59 points, I think, is the lead. Only a few races ago, the amount of points he needed per race to catch Max and take the title was about 8.5, and now it's like almost 12. So it's just getting harder and harder. Piastri had more of a quiet weekend. I mean, he just ran behind them. He caught up to Max and Lando near the end of the race, but for most of it, he was just off doing his own thing, just not really fast enough. And in the sprint, well, obviously he messed up the sprint, having to getting knocked out Q1 because of track limits, which shouldn't be a problem, but here we are. Made some gains, and then he got a penalty, I think, as well. So just didn't really happen for him. This is where people argue that this is Lando has the edge and it's experience, but every so often Piastri is still just making these errors.
Mm-hmm. I just think it's not a great lineup. It's like they are both good drivers, and I think Lando especially, I think, proved himself in the midfield, but I think he hasn't got the mental strength to do well in a top car. At least not now. Maybe in 2 years' time we'll be looking back on him as a champion who's managed to dominate a season. But right now he just doesn't have the mental strength to be able to, especially not to someone like Max, who is just monotonous. He's a metronome of consistency, and Lando just isn't. Like, if Lando was in a car that was like the 2023 Red Bull was, absolutely he's winning the title, because his lowest points will be him probably in second behind Max in a much slower car. But it's just, it is genuine. I said this before and I'll say it again. Lando is just reminding me of either a young Nigel Mansell or Damon Hill throughout his entire career. Just not good enough to win a title off his own merit.
Yeah, he well, Helmut Marko agrees with you, because he was the one saying, well, the reason Lando's losing is because his mental health isn't good enough, or mentally he's not strong enough. Of course, Fat Brown comes to his defense and is like, yeah, because Lando is one of the drivers who he's quite open about mental health struggles, which I get in that he acknowledges that it exists, but he's also quite vague about what that entails exactly. Other than he said he still gets very nervous before races. He often doesn't eat anything on race day. Max doesn't care because he's up till 3 a.m. the night before, doing iRacing and that, and Assetto Corsa. But yeah, Lando is just terrified before races, and he has been openly said he's performing. He kind of contradicts himself, because he says he's performing below expectations, and he is struggling in this fight. But then he's also said, well, even if I lose the championship, it's still a victory this year.
That's not how it works, Chief.
Yeah, I know. It's like, here's your participation medal. Like, it's not, you've got the fastest car. It should not be this difficult. You should be wrapping up the championship probably this weekend or the next one.
I mean, there are some drivers in the past who've had, like, quote unquote, not superstitions, but kind of things that they do before a race. Like, you say Lando was nervous. James Hunt was always nervous before races. He always used to throw up before every race, and he just went on and did it. So there are ways that drivers can get around, quote, like, mental weaknesses. And James was doing that in the 70s when mental health wasn't a thing.
I think it's a bit more understandable with James, because it's like, well, I could die in this car, whereas with Lando, that's in these cars, that's not a concern.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I didn't consider that, to be fair.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, with James, because it is a mental health thing. I was going to say maybe it's his crippling alcoholism too, but
he never drank on race weekends. He was daft, but he wasn't that irresponsible.
Yeah, I think he substituted alcohol for women on race weekends. We're in an age where, as well as athletes being more open about mental health, in general, the psychology of sport is being taken more seriously, and it being understood in a way that it wasn't in the past.
Yeah, because
the drivers, any sport, including F1, the athletes that were at their peak, 40, 50 years ago, they don't talk about mental health. And they're also, a lot of them in Formula One are surprisingly unswayed by the amount of drivers that they saw die as well, unless they were really, really attached to them. They just kind of understood, well, this is a part of it. And if someone dies in the race, you just keep going, and we race again next week, and we just carry on.
They just had that was just because of how it went. Like, especially especially just as F1 starts to get going, you got to think not even 10 years ago at the start of the World Championship, they just had World War II. They just seen millions of people dying on the battlefield. So, maybe not personally, maybe so for some of the drivers, but the world was a much different place. Even going into the 70s and 80s, it was just seen as a normal thing that drivers like. I think the quote was from Rush, Niki Lauda, or Daniel Brühl, or whatever his name is, said that every year two drivers die, and we're content with that.
I mean, it is. When people always throw that stat out, it's like it is a bit of an exaggeration.
Yeah.
Like in the 50s, it's 2 a year if you include Indy 500, but from the 60s onwards, there were several years where no one died. had some
in Formula One events. Was that just in Formula One events, or was that Formula One drivers overall dying?
Well, there are going to be drivers that die from. Well, if you talk about just F1, there are a lot of years where no one died.
Yes,
but yes, it would add up if you included non F1 racing as well. Then there would be some extra ones.
I think I did a not a video on this, but I think I did an article of some sort on this, and I think the stat was that of all of the F1 drivers that have ever competed in a World Championship race, I think it's 16% of them have died from non-natural causes, whether that be a plane crash or whatever. Anything that isn't natural, 16% of them have died in, whether it be an example like a helicopter accident or a car racing accident, anything that wasn't considered a natural death.
Yeah. Which compared to most other sports is very high. But yeah. It's just that nobody died until 1954, although we had people die in non-championship races.
And a couple, obviously, in Indy.
In the 60s, no one died in 62 or 63.
Yeah.
There was Von Trips in 61, Godin de Beaufort 64, John Taylor in 66 or 67, Bandini in 67.
In 68.
Yes, but that was a hill climb.
Yeah.
So that was in Formula One.
Mike Parks, did they die in that year?
Mike Parks?
Or Mike Spence, one of the two. I can't remember which one it is.
I don't think either of them did. Well, not in Formula One.
Okay.
Bob Anderson, 67. Joe Schlesser in 68.
Yeah.
61, no one.
Piers Courage was 69, wasn't he?
No, that wasn't. No. 70 was Courage and Rindt. 71. No, I don't think anyone died in 71. In 73, there was. Joe Siffert. That was non-championship, but still F1 car. That was 72. And then Roger Williamson and Francois Sever in 73. Helmut Koenig in 74.
Yeah.
Mark Donoghue in 75. Was it Peter Revson 74 as well?
Yeah, Peter Revson was 74.
Almost Lauder in 76. Tom Price in 77. Ronnie Peterson in 78.
Yeah.
And then Depailler in 80. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bit of a detour that, but yeah. So we went from listing driver deaths to James Hunt to Lando mental health. Yeah, the drivers in general these days, and this maybe is just a thing in culture as well, not to sound like a boomer, but they're just too coddled and protected. Because even in the sporting environment, it's like, okay, here's your car. Okay, here's your car, which is incredibly safe. Here's your army of hundreds of mechanics and engineers who are going to make sure it's perfectly fine-tuned and set up. It's not going to break down on you. Here's all the technicians and the pit wall who've got your setup, and everything is done exactly as you need it. We just tell you which buttons to press, and it's all done. It's like so much has become autonomous.
Yeah.
Whereas before, 50 years ago, it was like, okay, jump in. There's your fuel gauge. There's your oil temperature. Just go, and hopefully you make it back alive.
Yeah.
And then there's 5 people here to fix the car.
I think Lando, it also doesn't help that Lando compared to Max. I think Lando is trying very hard to get this title because it's his first chance. He wants to prove himself. Whereas Max is aloof. He doesn't care. He knows he's established himself. Maybe not, obviously, this is 2024 Max. If we're talking about 2018 Max, it'd be a different story. But he doesn't have to prove himself. He knows that the ball is in his court. As long as he does fine, he's going to do well. He's going to be all merry. Whereas Lando has to make an advantage. He's trying. You've seen that at points this season. He's trying to actively gain on Max, and that's what I think is taking it out of him. If they were in a reverse situation where it was Lando who had the advantage to start with, he might have done better.
Yeah, I don't think it helps him that at the beginning of the season he wasn't in this fight, and they were slightly worse than when they were at the end of last year. But yeah, for the first 5 races, it was like, it's going to be the Max Verstappen show. And then suddenly he's in it, and it's like, well, now I've got the fastest car, but I'm also miles behind in the points, and I need to catch up. If he'd had a car like this from the beginning of the season, he'd probably be leading the championship. So it's caught him out a bit. It's the kind of thing where we've seen this before, that drivers, it doesn't happen one year, and then the next year they're able to improve, and it does happen. I mean, as examples, Damien Hill 95 going into 96, Nigel Mansell 91 into 92. Those are just the ones that you can point at.
Yeah.
So maybe because if Red Bull continue to keep going down the toilet in terms of hemorrhaging staff, then I think they won't be much of a competitor next year anyway, so that would help them. Next team, Mercedes. Oh dear.
So
wow,
much potential.
Yeah, what a weekend this was for them.
Yeah.
I don't know what to think with them because they're all over the place in terms of where the car is. Because in Singapore it was a competitive car, and then they kind of squandered strategy on Lewis and wrecked that. And then this time the car wasn't that competitive, and they also just couldn't drive it. Like Lewis almost had a massive crash right at the start of FP1. They qualify as just fourth fastest basically in the sprint race. Lewis has damage. Neither of them are really on the pace at all. And then in the race, I mean, well, first of all, he gets knocked out in Q1, which we have seen a few times in the past couple of years.
Yeah.
But I think that is 19th. That might be his worst ever qualifying. I'm not sure if he ever did that badly in 2009.
I think it might be. I'll quickly go and look at my stat sheet if you want to continue.
Yeah, so he had a bunch of Q1 eliminations in 2009. There's been the odd one here and there since 2022, like Jeddah and Imola and stuff. But then he just spun off on the second lap by himself. And I don't think Lewis has crashed out of a race by himself since Monza 2009. So, yeah, 15 years. And that was the final lap, and this was only on the second lap. That's a really, really rare mistake, because usually when he does crash, it's into someone else, not just on his own. So when I did my video every champion's best and worst race, I put his worst race as Silverstone 2009 because he was knocked out in Q1, beaten by Kovalainen. He did his best impression of Massa at Silverstone and finished like 14th or something when he won it the previous year. But I think at this point, this takes the cake for his worst ever weekend.
Right, there have been a couple of times where Lewis has qualified lower than 19th, and by a couple I literally mean a couple. Two of them, well, you had Hungary 2014 where he was right at the back. China 2016 when he was right at the back, but those weren't his fault.
Yeah, that's what he's been at the back because of engine penalties, but in terms of actually just qualifying at the back, like that's
there is
the
one
best
more.
he can do.
Let me just scroll back to where it was. It was 2010 for some reason, I don't know why. In Malaysia, he qualified 20th.
That was because of rain.
Okay.
Because Alonso and Massa and Button all got caught out as well.
His worst qualifying performances in so he did have 19th, that was in Silverstone. He had 18th in Brazil, he had 16th in Monaco and Turkey, and 15th in Australia, 14th in Turkey.
2009.
Yeah, that is.
So this is basically So I think this. I mean, he started the race from 17th because George ended up who made it to Q3, ended up starting from the pit lane so they can make setup changes. Or no, they had to fix the car because of course he crashes himself at the same corner in Q3. And then Lawson had a penalty, and so he started the race in 17th, but he got up to 12th on the first lap because he just went straight down the inside, and I was like, fair play, that works. But yeah, just spun off. And that was that, and you almost never see. I mean, the last time he nearly did the same, Imola 2021, but he managed to get the car going again. Yeah, he hasn't done this for a very, very long time.
That wasn't on his own because he was trying to overtake a car there. I mean, I know it wasn't directly involved, but you could.
This literally, 15 years it's been since he's made a mistake like that. Weekend to forget for him. George, marginally better. I guess he got ahead of him in the sprint race, but then he had damage. Crashes in Q3, took Max's pole away. But then in the race, he came from the back. He was putting a lot of moves on. He did he ran extremely long on that hard tyres. He went over 40 laps on it. Because again, this turned into a race because of the early safety car, because of Lewis. Even though it was only 3 laps in, everyone was just like, say no more. 1 stops, tyre save all the time. Here we go. Otherwise, they would have done 2 stops. But he did very well off that. He managed to pass Checo, although he did get the 5-second penalty for overtaking, I can't remember who, but one of them. His response was just, what? Like the most English what you've ever heard. So he, again, he can climb through, he can run super long on the tyres, so a mixed weekend on his end.
Yeah. I think that's just a write-off for Mercedes. They really need to book up their ideas in terms of consistency. That's the one thing that they've been lacking, especially Lewis this season. They've been lacking consistency all over the place. Like, they can have their good weekends. They had Silverstone, they had Spa, They had even, I mean, Austria was decent. I mean, didn't really get that win on merit, but it was still decent. They need to book their ideas up.
I don't. It's just weird because it's like nothing's changed since Singapore, and suddenly the car they just can't drive it, and they're just not. It just falls apart between every single session. They're like, oh my god, the car sucks in practice, and then they go into Q3 and almost get pole, and suddenly it comes alive, and then it sucks again in the race. They just. I guess it just proves that they're power unit merchants because this isn't an era of aero, and their aero sucks, and they can't rely on having a car that's probably twice as powerful as everyone else, including their customers. And yeah.
I mean, it doesn't suck. I mean, being the fourth best team at your worst point is not necessarily bad. That's why I've been saying, like, all the Lewis fans I've been seeing, whether it be on Twitter, whether it be on whatever platform it is, they're always like, oh, this is such a bad performance. This is a bad time to be a Mercedes fan. I'm like, how do you think Williams fans feel?
Yeah, it's I mean, they've kind of gone back to most races. It's a similar performance level to where they were from 2010 to 2012.
Yeah.
But the thing is, apart from the one race they did the win, they were never in contention for victories in any of those races generally, because they had four other teams in front of them. But now they have had races where some of them they've won, others they could have won. Yeah. But yeah, Lewis's results pretty up and down again. 7th, 9th retired, 9th, 6th, 6th, 7th, 4th, 3rd, 4th, 1st, 3rd, 1st, 8th, 5th, 9th, 6th. So that's much more yo-yoing. I mean, he's still finishing in the points, and I was convinced, even though he was starting right at the back, I was thinking he's still going to get in the points today because he always does. And he got to 12th on the first lap. It's like, okay, he's probably going to finish the race in 6th or 7th or something, but it didn't happen.
How many of the top 10 positions has he finished in? Has he finished in first, second, third, fourth? Has he finished in all of the top 10 positions this season?
He hasn't finished second. He's finished fourth.
It would have been Spa.
Yeah, he's finished. He hasn't. So yeah, he's finished everywhere except 2nd and 10th. But otherwise, he's got all the others covered.
Yeah, that's not very good across one season.
It means now that he's only George is only 10 points behind, so he's beginning to offset, the disqualification and then the mechanical failure in Silverstone. But he again 5th, 6th, 17th, 7th, 6th, 8th, 7th, 5th, 3rd, 4th, 1st, retired, 8th, disqualified, 7th, 7th, 3rd, 4th, 6th. So he's equally inconsistent and all over the place. It's just not working as a team. And I mean, now people were saying a few races ago, oh, does Lewis regret leaving? It's like, I don't think he does. When you look at a race like this that just passed, it's going to be fun for Kimi Antonelli when he goes in there as a rookie to try and deal with all of this. And I imagine the ethos and the way the team operates is probably going to change substantially once Lewis is gone and his influence has gone as well.
Yeah.
The black cars, there'll be none of that. They'll go back straight silver arrows for next year.
That would be the sensible option. I mean, yeah. It'll be George and Kimi. I mean, they'll probably have to make the car less volatile, which could help them because I think the car is just it's either good or it's shit, or it's kind of in between, but it's hard to handle. There's no way that Kimi, as a rookie, is going to be able to handle that without making himself look like a fool every race.
He's going to crash a lot.
Yeah,
he's going to do Monza because I think to like Kimi, you'll need to go out there on the soft tires to quality run straight away. Just do all of that. Yeah. Just to impress everyone and set bullshit fastest laps that don't count in practice or whatever. We'll see how he does. I mean, he's going to barely be 18, and I don't know. But George will probably manage because he's been there for a few years and he's got this rookie. I'm not expecting Kimi to really give him much of a fight. Who's next? Haas. Haas. Yes, they had a good weekend. They bought a bunch of upgrades and practice in the sprint. People looking at the pace and thinking they're looking like best of the rest really here. They both in the points in the sprint, or okay, not quite. Oh no, they were. Yeah, sixth and 8th in the sprint. In between. That's qualifying. 7th and 8th. So yeah, not and with Magnussen ahead, which is quite rare. Yeah. In the race. Well, for Magnussen, things kind of fell apart a bit. He was running ahead of Hülkenberg, and then he got done he got undercut by someone.
I don't remember either, so don't feel dumb.
Yeah, but yeah, Hülkenberg just did his thing, got 4 points. The car worked at their so-called home race. So yeah, not bad for them.
I mean, Haas being called an American team is a bit of a joke at this point. They were sponsored by Russians. They're now partnered with a Japanese company. If you went time travel back to 1945 and said that the US would be partnering, or maybe the 1950s, that they were partnering with Japan and Russia, I think you give everyone in America a heart attack. But yeah.
Yeah, but it's like every team except Sauber, AlphaTauri, and Ferrari is British because their bases are British.
Yeah.
Basically, all of their staff is British. Like, there's not like Ferrari, at least with them, as well as being in Italy, most of the staff are Italian.
Yeah, and plus Italy is a kind of, although Britain is probably the biggest motorsport engineering hub in the world, in terms of especially open wheel racing, Italy's not close second, but it's still a very healthy pool of like talent.
Yeah, they're reasonably good at car engineering, at least, not so much bridges and buildings and all of that.
Yeah.
But they got that down. Alpine is not a British team because not a French team. The only French part of it is now being closed down and colonized by Mercedes.
Yeah.
So it's going to become Alsades, and again, they're all British on that, and it's based in Britain. And yeah, they're not. Yeah, Red Bull is not an Austrian team, and Mercedes is not a German team, because if they were, they'd be based at wherever in Germany Mercedes factory is. Probably Stuttgart. Porsche are there as well. I think Audi are in Stuttgart. Just they'd be there in the actual factory.
I mean, I classed like Red Bull as Austrian and Mercedes as German for my video I did ranking all the best nations in F1, but that's only because if I didn't do that, then it would be Britain by an absolute mile in about 5 other countries.
And it's also because, strictly speaking, you have to, if the racing, because this is the thing about when it comes to racing licenses and sporting licenses that athletes or teams use, is that it's not quite as simple as, oh, you were born here, so that's where you do it. They can. Yeah. Normally, when you get athletes that change their country, usually you have to have some kind of link that either you live there now or you've got some kind of ancestry from it or whatever. But some people just change things on a whim, and that.
But you've seen a lot more footballers nowadays being born in a big nation, and then they also have links to a smaller nation, and then when they realize they're not good enough to play for like the England national team, they go to somewhere else.
Yeah, or just pick whichever country you're more likely to win trophies with.
Yeah.
When it comes to the World Cup or something.
Yeah, it is great. It is a bit like because with the back to the racing licenses. For example, if I said that because Jordan were based in Silverstone, they're British, I'd get fucking flamed for that, rightfully so.
I mean, with Jordan, at least Eddie Irvine, Eddie Jordan himself was Irish.
Yeah.
Even if I imagine most of the team staff were British, but at least he was. Again, it's a bit of a grey area, especially when it comes to sport. It's between Britain and Ireland, the rules are, because of Good Friday Agreement, it's just do whatever you want. Like we're not going to make hard and fast rules and say you're Irish, you're English, or whatever.
Yeah, I do know that. I do know one bit of trivia that in both of Jordan's wins, they mistakenly played the British national anthem on the podium.
Yeah, because I guess you would just assume, oh, it's British and that, so why not? But yeah, Haas, the weekend was good. This Toyota partnership. They haven't outright said it's Toyota engines. Yeah. Have they? Or
no, they haven't.
Technical partnership.
It's just a technical partnership. I've had a lot of people saying that it could lead to an engine deal down the line, or some people have just thought it's going to be engine deal. I'm like, it's not been outright said, and I don't think it will happen. Every single time, the one time Toyota came into F1, they threw a bunch of money at the wall and it didn't work. I think they'll be hesitant after their previous stint as a team. I really. If they come and join F1, all great, and it's all the merry, because we'll have about 8 engine constructors by the end of 2026, and it'll be fantastic. But I wouldn't be surprised if they just said, okay, it's just a technical partnership, we're dipping our toes in the water. If it goes well, it might lead to something more. But if Haas just do a Haas thing and become the back of the grid in the next couple of years, they might just quietly dip out.
I mean, to be honest, awful previous stints have never stopped Honda from coming and going every 5 minutes. Maybe Toyota will want to, but the issue with these big manufacturers again is that they have to think about what translates into the automotive market, and that's the whole selling point of us still having these fucking hybrids. Yeah. To be fair, I wouldn't mind if we having the hybrids if they sounded like V10s. If you can find a way of making them sound like V10s, then we can keep them. But because they don't, they just suck.
I don't like hybrids, not because of the, I'm not a boomer and it's not, it's electric, it's gay nonsense. I more think it's because they are heavier and heavier cars in F1 produce worse racing, and like everything around that. Heavier cars means bigger cars, means it's just, I feel like there's much better ways we can be innovative and be useful in relating to automotive technology than hybrids, whether it be biofuels like they're having get WEC to do all the electric stuff, or just anything that doesn't detract from the actual product.
Well, this is the whole thing about me being behind, Vettel's Race Without Trace initiative, is that this could be his greatest ever contribution to F1, is that he's the one who brings back V10s. If they can get the biofuels and the synthetic fuels going, and we can have the V10s. I mean, there'll always be the concern, even if we found a way to be, eco-friendly, we still have to think about what translates into the market. And it's like, well, why shouldn't eco-fuels translate into the market? Because it's so much cheaper than buying electric and hybrid cars with these gigantic batteries. Again, these are not very green cars if you think about the kind of materials that we need to farm and plunder to make those batteries. Yeah. Also, the electricity that's powering them is still being generated by, coal firing plants and stuff like that. So it's not, It's like maybe just think, in the grand scheme of things, 24 90-minute races a year is not really doing that much to the ozone or whatever, and just let us have a bit of fun.
It's not the racing about that's making, like, for example, F1's trying to go net zero carbon. I'm pretty sure the actual racing, the on-track product, only makes up about like 5% of that. All of the other 95% is traveling around the world. And the way they can fix that is, one, actually, how they said they were going to put races in the same region and go region by region,
which they did a little bit this year.
But... actually do that, and go back to 20 races a season. That instantly cuts off 20% of your carbon emissions.
Because I think the total distance you'd have needed to travel the very first season, and this is only because the Indy 500 was about 7,000 miles. But if you took that off, it's probably barely less than half of that. I think it's more like 50, 60,000 miles if you go point to point between races. Because they're still I mean, even in this tail end, we've got three American races in a row. That's fair enough. But then we're going, then we're having to wait for 3 weeks, and then we're doing Vegas, or we're doing Qatar first, isn't it? And then we're going to Vegas, and then back to Abu Dhabi. Like, whose idea was this? I mean, first of all, we don't need Vegas, but even if we had it, you could attempt a quadruple stint, or because we have this 3-week gap again coming up in a couple of weeks, you could have fit something in the middle in there, rather than going to the Middle East and then back again.
I actually made my Dream F1 calendar a couple of weeks ago. I think I posted it on Twitter. If I just get it up, I can tell you the way I organised the races. So I started off in Melbourne because it's a good starting point for a season. And then I went to where was it? I went to Sepang, Korea, Suzuka/Fuji on a yearly alternate. Then I went over to Europe for Spain, Monaco, Austria, Silverstone, and then the European Grand Prix, which would be like a rotating race. Belgium, Italy, and then over to Asia. So like 2 bypass races in Turkey and Azerbaijan, then over to Singapore, and then going back to North America via Rwanda, then Canada, then United States, then Argentina and Brazil.
I get that we need a race in Africa, but really, this notion that we're going to race in Rwanda, like that's really not going to happen.
I mean, I want it to. I have family in Rwanda, so it'd be great.
Just that South Africa has the circuit already. It just doesn't have anything else.
Yeah,
because it's got
infrastructure. It's not got the right political environment. I think Kyalami genuinely would be an awful track to race on, because it's like a worse version of Zandvoort. It has one tiny, not medium-sized straight. Then the rest of it is just corners you won't be able to overtake on.
Yeah, I mean it's very, very similar. It's very, very similar to Bud. The layout is almost exactly the same, but Bud is a fantastic circuit.
I mean, Bud has longer straights though, and I don't know. Kyalami is great for GT3 and all these smaller types, but I don't think it'd be good for F1. It's too short. There's not much going on.
But the issue is, okay, yes, we have a circuit you can race on, but would the attendance be any good? Also, there's the constant risk of recurring blackouts. The drivers are going to have a similar level of security that they have in Sao Paulo, getting to and from the circuit as well. It's just basic things like this. It's really not it's really not the time. But there isn't anywhere else that could justify it because there's well, first of all, nowhere else in Africa has an FIA Grade 1 circuit, or really any circuits of any kind. To be honest,
I mean, there's a couple in Morocco. I think with the Formula E stuff, I'm not sure if the street circuit in Morocco would be anywhere near up to par.
A Formula E street circuit is not obviously a street circuit can be built anywhere, but a Formula E street circuit is not going to cut it for Formula One. I don't think they're going to bring back Ain Diab anytime soon.
Yeah, because that literally would be pretty much flat out in modern F1 cars the entire way around.
But again, I think that would be a challenge: is finding a suitable city in Africa that has the right kind of streets. I don't.
That's why, because the main problem with African countries and international events is just they aren't stable enough. Apart from a couple of places in North Africa, so your Morocco's, your Egypt's, none of them are really.
Yeah, even Egypt is a bit touch and go in terms of stability and safety at the moment, but it's probably a best bet.
Yeah, that's why I think Rwanda is on the up, because, like, don't get me wrong, there are still problems. It's a dictatorship, and there's problems with the actual ruling of the country and some of the things that go on with it. But I believe that it has promise. It could be the kind of the Singapore of Africa. That's what they're trying to promote themselves as.
Yeah, I mean, racing in dictatorships has never stopped F1 before, but it's just that I think it might rub people the wrong way. It's like, we're going to spend X amount of millions of dollars putting on this great spectacle of a race. And it's like, so the government is willing to do this, but yet there are loads of people that can't afford food and stuff like that. It's that sort of thing that would always look a bit.
To be fair, their economy is improving. They have a burgeoning-ish middle class, and overall, I think their GDP per capita. This is getting into proper business and economy stuff. I think it's tripled in the last 10 years. They know what they're doing when it comes to GDP. As I said, I think for the first 10 years or so, it would probably be just like it is in Saudi Arabia, where it was just for the show and just to try and get people to go to Rwanda, which is their main thing, visit Rwanda.
Yeah,
but I think that eventually it could develop. It could help develop the country in a sort of. I know they usually use that as a tagline for Saudi Arabia. Oh, we're looking to develop sporting interests in the region, when we all know the real reasons why they're going to Saudi Arabia. But
yeah, and also that you're developing sporting interest because the oil is going to run out soon, and then no one has to keep sucking your dick anymore.
And you have to start actually charging people taxes, and then they'll fuck off to whichever tax they want to go to.
Yeah, but I mean, this will please now. But Mauritius has potential, because that's the Singapore of Africa. In terms of, I mean, there wouldn't be any issues there in terms of. Well, they need to build a circuit unless they do a street circuit. In terms of building a circuit, that could be done. The economy, it would be a great tourism hub as well for people to go and actually enjoy the country as well. It would be safe. I mean, that one definitely has potential. Not very. It's quite small, but I think the aesthetics would work, because it would be like racing in the Caribbean without the Caribbean.
It'd be like a Hawaiian Grand Prix.
It would be, yeah. It would be like that. It'd be like how to have Formula racing on this tropical island with amazing beaches and stuff. It has potential. I don't know, but the others, South Africa. It's. I understand the reasons for wanting to race in Africa, but it's just not ready yet. Unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree.
What's after Haas? RB. Lawson
did good. Yeah.
He had some fun battling with Alonso in both races and annoying him. His comeback, yeah, a little bit touch and go, I guess. He did fine, and it was a bit funny in the sprint, but he got into a rhythm in the actual race, and went from last to 9th, so good showing from him. Yeah,
I think there's not really much that can be said. Tsunoda, I didn't see, apart from his battle with Perez, I didn't see him do anything all weekend. And it's just
he got overcut, I think, by Lawson, and then he was like, "Well, how the fuck did this happen?" And then I just knew I've seen it. Okay, he's gonna crash into Lawson trying to pass him, but then he got passed by Magnussen or whatever, and then just spun on his own anyway and ruined the race. And he already had a penalty before that as well for track limits or something. So that was great, because he's also, I mean, he's nominally auditioning for that seat, even though Red Bull, I'm not even sure they know he exists, to be honest. He's never been a shoe-in for that seat, and I don't think he's any closer to getting it now that he's already being beaten by
Yeah.
by Lawson, and also what does this say about Netflix?
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
he was getting beaten by Tsunoda.
I was going to say that. Like, I think Lawson in one race has done more than Ricardo's done since Miami.
Yeah, I mean maybe not in terms of points count, but in terms of making an impression.
Yeah.
And I think he knows because he said Marco said you're basically auditioning for the Red Bull seat. You know, I'm sure he'll take it and he'll be against Max next year. But let's be honest, it's not. I'm not expecting Red Bull to be brilliant next year, but maybe that'll take the edge off if he's not, becoming Checo Part 2.
Well, I do feel that if Red Bull get worse, I think that could actually benefit the second driver, because the way that Red Bull have always developed their cars is Max first, second driver second. And if they are not fighting for a championship, they're less likely to try and aggressively develop the car. And therefore, it will stay in the kind of range where a second driver who isn't aggressive, I'm not sure how Lawson's driving style really permits to that. But it could be the case, like, for example, with I know obviously they didn't have Verstappen at this point, but when Kvyat beat Ricciardo in 2015, Ricciardo was very highly rated at that point, and Kvyat beat him on the point standings.
Yeah, because it was a crap car, and he got lucky with one podium in some topsy-turvy race in Hungary. It would obviously take the pressure off in the sense that, well, if he drives like shit, he hasn't cost them the constructors title. And it's just a less pressurizing environment. I think it would still be pretty one-sided in Max's favor because he just kind of commands that. And I think he would think, if the car is not what we want it to be, you need to put all your eggs in my basket and suit it perfectly to me so I can drive it to my limits and get as much as I can out of it. We'll see. Because Max, he ignores Checo. He doesn't care at all. They say, oh, Checo's struggling. He's like, so? Checo is just invisible to him because he gives him no competition. And the one race where he could have beaten him, he crashed in the last lap. So I mean, they're again very inconsistent with pace, but strong weekend for Lawson, kind of squandered by Tsunoda, who maybe could have been in the points, but he made it to Q3 although he had to have Lawson help. Did he make? No, he didn't even make it to Q3, did he?
I'm not sure.
He had a very good start. He was running about 7th in the opening stint. He started the race in 10th, and that was so no, he didn't even make it to Q3 with the tow. It was funny that Lawson started the weekend with a raft of penalties left over from Ricciardo, basically. We'll see what happens with them, but I feel like Tsunoda might just be gone. Maybe they will just throw him in, particularly if Hadjar wins the F2 title. They're like, well, we kind of have to give him something to do because he's not allowed to race in F2 anymore. Unless we just banish him to Japan to do Super Formula like we did with Iwasa.
But yeah.
After them, Williams. Similar situation. I was going to say similar situation, because if you think about what Colapinto's doing to Albon, think about what that says about Latifi and Sargent as well.
Yeah. I genuinely rate Colapinto. I think he's the best thing that's happened to Argentina in F1 in about 40 years, obviously since Reutemann. He is fantastic. He has been, I'm trying to think of the last time I really thought a rookie was proving himself as a fantastic driver. I'd say he's been the best rookie. You could even argue the best rookie since Hamilton.
Well, it's hard to gauge because he's beating Albon more than you would expect in what's only been 4 races so far. I mean, Albon had an absolutely garbage weekend on his front, crashing into Ocon at the start and just being shit for the rest of the race. But Ronnie Fury said the thing is in F2 he was kind of middling it.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so kind of if he was like destroying everyone in Formula 2 and doing this, it's like, okay, well, fair enough. It was prophesized that was going to happen. But the fact that he's kind of average in that, it's like, do we go into this thinking that if you put Hadjar or Maloney or Paul Aaron or any of those in there, that they'd be winning races in that Williams or something?
No, I just think it's hard because obviously it seems to be the case that Formula 2 cars don't handle the same as F1 cars, because if they did, then Colapinto would be doing a lot better. Or it's just that, as I think there would have been several drivers who have gone completely under the radar in GP2/Formula 2 because the cars do not handle the way they want them to, and they would have done well in F1 because they do handle the way they want them to.
Yeah, and maybe this is the incentive to not make them a spec series, So the teams can actually like, oh well, if you don't like the car, we'll just change it and do our own thing. Because otherwise you do get these problems. Or I mean, that's only the first of. I mean, there are loads of things that Formula 2 needs to fix. I mean, engines that work is a good start. Tires that work, all of that would help.
I mean, it's already not really a spec series. I mean, obviously it is a spec series, but you know that no one's winning in a Genza. You know that you are probably going to win if you're in an ART, a Prema, or a high tech.
Yeah, because they've all got the Lance Stroll mechanic treatment, all paid better and have all the best equipment all the time and all of that. Same base car, but yeah, it just depends how well you can maintain it and set it up, I guess. But yeah, looking at this now, you have to think that like Sainz is going to tear Albon to shreds next year. But I love the way James Vowles is bullshitting. Is like, oh, we have the strongest driver lineup. It's like you really have been flattered by having two completely useless pay drivers up against Albon, because we saw Albon get shat on by Max in 2019 and 2020. Admittedly, Max shits on everyone, but still. And then he just got fluffed for 3 years by Latifi and Sargent.
I don't necessarily think Albon's a bad driver. I just don't think. I think I put him as a high C tier, maybe a low B tier on a good day, because he has had his good days. But I do think that, especially like the fact that Nick de Vries came in and did one really good race, or not really good, just kind of really good race. I'd wanted to see what Albon could have done in Monza 2022. If it had been Latifi who'd have been out with whatever it was, appendicitis, that would have been interesting to see if it was actually Nick de Vries being overly shitting. Let's say if Albon would have finished 5th and he actually got 9th. Then
again,
like,
de Vries destroyed Latifi, but then he was useless last year in AlphaTauri against Tsunoda. It's weird. I mean, Albon, he is one bullshit fluky win away from being French. Like, he's just looking intensely mid when at the beginning of the year people were even calling him a generational talent because of one double overtake he did in Canada and that. But they have they're in a difficult position because yes, you're going to take on Sainz and he's going to be a good asset because he's clearly an amazing driver, not as good as Leclerc, but still a damn good one. But they're like, oh, we're going to build the team around him and develop all this. And it's like, you are aware he's only with you because he got kicked out of Ferrari against his will and there was nowhere better to go. He's not there. He's not interested in starting from scratch and building a team up like it's F1 manager or something. He just wants to be winning races and championships, and that's not going to happen with them.
Yeah, as soon as the seat pops up, whether it be Red Bull or Mercedes or Aston Martin, if they can get their shit together, he's going to go for it.
I think there is an exit clause in his contract that actually allows him to leave before the season's begun. Even if he gets an offer from somewhere else, he can go.
That'll be fun.
And take it. And then I guess Colapinto, and then Colapinto gets to stay because now they're trying to, there's about 10 drivers in contention for the second Sauber seat, which is the least desirable seat you can think of. And
but
it has
an F1 seat,
I know, and it has more people linked to it than anything else. Because you think now, Bottas and Joe are both linked for some bizarre reason. Pourchaire, Maloney. Well, actually, no, Maloney's going into Formula E, so that's not going to happen. He jumped before he was pushed. Mick is linked to it.
Which Nick? Nick de Vries?
No, Mick.
Oh, Mick. Oh.
Mick Schumacher's been linked to it.
Well, we can go for all of these options. We can go for these options with one-word responses. So, Bottas, maybe. Joe, fuck off. Who was the other one? We had...
Pourchaire.
Pourchaire can fuck off. He's French and he looks like Megamind. I'm trying to think. Who else did you say? We already said about Maloney. He's not a thing.
No, Mick.
Mick can fuck off.
He's linked to Alpine. That's the thing. He's not an Alpine junior, but he's doing all their shit in WEC, and he's still a Mercedes reserve. There's not really a connection between Mercedes and Sauber. There was 30 years ago, but not now.
I think Mick would easily cease those links if he got an opportunity at Sauber, because it'd be his last chance at an F1 seat.
Also, he can lean on the whole. Oh, my dad drove for Sauber, 35 years ago. Yeah. He was a junior with them.
I just don't see it, because although I think Mick didn't get a fair shot in F1, I don't think he was fully given his chance to flourish. But still, And like, if he really was this generational talent that was just wasted at Haas, I think we would have seen more from him.
He would have beaten bloody Magnussen if that was the case at the
And
very
Magnussen
least.
got lost. Like, what was it called? Mazepin lost to Schumacher. Schumacher lost to Magnussen. Magnussen lost to Hulkenberg, and Hulkenberg arguably lost to Behrman. So it's a big human centipede of drivers.
Yeah. Ricardo is linked because of course he's linked because he's
Fuck off with your fucking Ricardo
because
bollocks.
he's never going to go away. Checo, there's even that rumor, and I guess technically if they kick him out,
I mean, he's been to Sauber before, and he's good in midfield teams. I mean, good midfield and back marker teams.
Of course, he did drive for. Oh my god, I'm so stupid. Of course, he used to drive for Sauber, and he was actually good when he drove for them.
I wouldn't.
Huckenberg was his teammate for years at Force India.
I wouldn't go against that either. Like, I think that I don't think that Perez is necessarily a bad driver. I just think he's in that second Red Bull seat. No one has performed well in that Red Bull seat since Ricardo.
I mean, that's actually quite reasonable to put him there because he's driven there before. A teammate he's very familiar with. They're both old dads. They can hang around at the back, and we don't have to care about him anymore because he'll be running around in last.
Yeah,
so that could be a good one because people have even said that get Vettel in. It's like Vettel is not coming back,
especially not with fucking Sauber of all fucking teams.
Yeah, to go back to the very beginning. Like I mean, I would kind of love it, but also hate it at the same time because
he wouldn't be competitive.
He'd be diabolically bad. Like 2 years out now, and you can tell he is completely switched off because he doesn't go to races and he drives around the world in some in a caravan powered by cows' farts or something. I don't know.
Good on him.
He's enjoying freedom and not having to live out of a suitcase with constant jet lag. He's earned his millions and now he gets to spend it. So let him have some fun. And also, I hate this idea of people retiring but they're never actually retiring.
It does happen. It's not. Admittedly, people like Schumacher and other drivers haven't really helped that, but it does happen. People just quietly quit and just.
There are just sports in general where they don't just quit and it's done. It doesn't happen enough. You get a lot of people that they retire, but then they come back and it just sort of fizzles out instead of like this is the end. Goodbye.
Yeah. It's only the super top driver, like the I mean, Vettel was a generational talent. I'm not saying he wasn't. But it's only like the people who are right at the top who generally retire and then come back, like your Alonso's, like your. I doesn't actually help because Alonso isn't exactly miles better than Vettel, but
he's gonna sit in his empty mansion surrounded by all the shit cars he drove, and just like I've got nothing to do, so I may as well go back. Yeah. Isn't Giovinazzi linked as well?
Why? Like again,
I don't know.
Giovinazzi had a couple of good moments at the end of 2021, but it's not enough. Like. If it was 2022, I'd be like, fair enough. He deserves an extra year because he wasn't exactly horrendous. But this is not. Giovinazzi won Le Mans, fair enough. But pretty much anyone who's even a decent driver can win Le Mans right now.
I think as well there were notions of Paul Aaron because he wasn't a junior with anyone. So that when he was looking good at the start of the season, but now he's driving like shit. So they don't care. I want Dirksen in it. Like I want
Dirksen's underrated. I will say that.
I want the drivers the old school drivers that aren't from academies where everything's set up for them and they've got some dodgy, probably illegal backing because it's South American. And he's driving that PHM. It already looks like a Sauber. It's got the same color scheme. And yeah, he was meant to be. It's like, oh, he's just the other Frecker graduate that is there for money. And it's like, yeah, but look at what he's doing. He's actually driving all right when he was a complete nobody in Frecker.
Have they confirmed the F2 seats for next year, or something? Do we know where he's driving?
Only not him. Only 3 or 4 seats have been confirmed.
I think I think if I was like ART, Dams, High Tech, I'd be thinking of him as like as a wild card option.
Yeah, my first thought is realistically, he's either going to go to one of the top teams or he's just going to sell his soul to Formula E or something. Because Dennis Hauger's going to Indy next, which, if anything, feels like a step backwards because that's another junior series.
He should have gone straight to IndyCar, in my opinion. He would have easily gone to like Ray Hall, Letterman, Lanigan, and been decently good.
I mean, he spent
like Lundgaard and people have done that before. So
because he spent 10,000 years in Formula 2, and he was a Red Bull junior for 6 years and went nowhere with that.
He dominated F3 and then he just fizzled out in F2. I don't know.
And Frecker, just kind of became average. And the backlog, the thing is, with Red Bull, you have to do it quickly. You have to just win everything really rapidly and move up because otherwise there's a huge queue of people behind you that are going to get in there instead. So he just missed his chance. Alpine. So they had, well, because of course it's America, it's Texas, and for some reason that warrants special helmets and special liveries. So they come out with this rusty-looking thing that looks like a shit McLaren. Yeah, another weekend when they were just slow, but then Albon got spun round at the start by Ocon got spun round at the start by Albon. Gasly was in 6th, but then he got undercut to within an inch of his life during the pit stops and lost like 5 positions off of that, and they just kind of went nowhere and had a very anonymous weekend.
Yeah, there's not really much to say. But like, I know we always joke about Sauber being mediocre and doing nothing all weekend, but I'd argue that it's the same with Alpine, if not for Ocon's early spin.
Yeah. But it just meant, I mean, Gasly, he avoided getting lapped. Although he was another one that got a 5-second time penalty. Ocon, I think he was complaining about balance issues a lot because he ended up finishing in between the Saubers. So I think something was wrong there. But yeah, had.
I've just remembered he also nicked the fastest lap from Colapinto, the fucking bastard.
Yeah, they did that at the end, pretending that they're fighting with Williams. I don't know. I mean, well, I suppose to be fair, Williams are only 4 points ahead of them. And all of that has come within the past 4 races. They've suddenly shot up, and at this rate, they could probably take RB. It's actually it's once again like last year. Those bottom 4 teams, except Sauber, it's actually very close between them.
Yeah.
So that is getting.
This is why I've always been saying, like, you know how the reason why they keep expanding the points in F1 is because the cars keep getting more reliable. The cars have gone from like 2010. I'd argue that like you'd have about 5-6 retirements most races.
Now it's 1, if that.
I think they should expand it to 15 points. 15 drivers get points.
15 is a bit much. Maybe I think maybe 12. I mean, this is another thing, and I'm doing a video on this soon. Is they're removing the fastest lap point next year, which has divided some people. I mean, I feel like it does warrant a point, but I don't like the idea that people just pit at the end to steal it.
I believe that it should be allowed, but I also think that they should have pole position point as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Pole position, that should always have been a thing. But the other thing as well is that I feel like it would warrant having a point, having a point for fastest lap if we still had refueling, because then you could set the fastest lap at any point in the race. Whereas we always know, okay, it's going to be who can set the fastest lap on dead tires with low fuel at the end, or someone just pits on the last lap to steal it. And it's just annoying that it's become that way, because the only people you can only do that if there's a gap behind. You're not going to lose any positions. But yeah, may as well just get rid of it.
But the one thing I suggested about the fastest lap was, I know you said you didn't like people just pitting right at the end. I suggested that they should open it up to the entire field, because if you're in a slow car like a Sauber or an Alpine and you pit for soft tires and you can offset the car deficit with a tire deficit, I think you deserve it. I think if you can offset the car deficit.
The thing is, if we did that, Zhou Guanyu would have the fastest lap in every single race, and he'd be sat on 19 points at the moment. So he single-handedly would have put Sauber ahead of Williams and Alpine.
But then you could also argue it'd be a great race to see like the guys in it from 11th to 20th trying to go for it because they'd have nothing to lose.
I mean, I kind of would have loved if we could have seen it, 20 years ago, maybe, if like 10 years ago, we've seen HRTs pitting at the end to see if they can just do a quali lap, and if that's enough to nab fastest lap.
It probably wouldn't be. It probably wouldn't have been so, because they're like 6 seconds off the pace.
I don't think there's enough of a difference. But yeah, with this, it might do something. But then I feel like that would become very gimmicky, because every single driver from 11th down would pit on the penultimate lap, is the thing. And then it just becomes it's like a mini 1 lap sprint, or what, right at the I don't know. Yeah, it makes things easier to work out points and calculations and that without it. Aston Martin. So Alonso, he enjoyed his weekend, getting fucked in the arse by 2 rookies and moaning constantly. That was interesting. Drivers that weren't even alive when he was a rookie. Yeah, he was just, again, the car sucked. and he was just moaning the whole time. Somehow he salvaged 12th or whatever, even though he got overtaken about 200 times in the race. His record at COTA is not brilliant, but then but then Aston Martin, they tend to just get worse and worse as the season goes on. His season trajectories are basically the same as his quali trajectories. It starts great and then it's just bollocks by the end. Stroll was cutting corners everywhere and almost killing drivers and just being slow, and he ended up near the Saubers, and it's continuing to hold the team hostage.
Yeah, there's not really much I can add to that. I didn't spot Aston Martin once the entire weekend, apart from Alonso complaining about Lawson. That was literally it.
Yeah, it's just that now that in the same way that Sauber are waiting for the Audi buyout, they're waiting for Newey. But it's gonna be a very long wait before you have a car that's completely with his pen.
Yeah.
And then there's no guarantee it will even work. But that for Alonso, he really is running out of time in terms of how much longer can he wait and still be competitive, and hold off. Assuming he wants a family, because I mean, for men technically, there's nothing to stop you starting a family at any age. But mid-40s is a bit late for that, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'd have been all right in the 50s because everyone would be same age as him. But now he's keeping it going just about. But again, he started 7th and finished 13th. That's a huge drop off. Yeah. I mean, Stroll started 13th and finished 15th, so that's just Alonso out driving it and then just not working in the races because they brought more upgrades, which once again have made the car worse.
Yeah.
And then it's Sauber. Joe spun. He wasn't last. I think because of that kerfuffle at the start. He got himself up to 16th, and then he realised he wasn't in last, so he decided to spin and put himself back in last. He pitted really early, and then even on new tyres couldn't catch anyone and was like 40 seconds behind Bottas by the end. And Bottas was just overtaken a few times.
Yeah. I think they probably checked out at the first race of the season, but definitely so now. There's just nothing going on there at the moment.
Yeah, and Joe is, he's not selling himself if they do want to keep him. It's with him. It's hard to say. People have tried to look into where his money comes from because the Chinese economy is a bit more kind of locked up than Western economies, and so it's hard to say. And people don't know much about his family. But he might come from like the richest family in China. It's hard to own like a couple of car manufacturing plants or something, car factories. I don't know, something stupid. So it might be he just comes from an insane amount of money, or it's just the CCP are pushing him because it's this one driver they've got and let's go and that.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah. So pretty anonymous for them. Overall, the race was reasonably decent. The championship battle, I mean, as I said before, that battle at the end, it wasn't that tense because it made so little difference to the fight. Because the only way, if Lando was in Charles' position, it's like, well, he's at least getting 10 points out of this, and if Piastri's going to take more off, but it's just not. We keep thinking there's going to be this big battle, and it's not going to come. And Max will probably wrap the title up in Vegas or Qatar at this rate.
That's an interesting point because how much? So it's like, what is it? 55 points now around that sort of range.
It's 59 points. Before this weekend started, the earliest possible point that Max could clinch the title is Sao Paulo if he won every race with Lando not scoring any more points. It's probably more like, I think because 59 ahead. If he holds on to that, he could take it in Qatar.
Yeah, it's just Lando is completely bottom of this season. Like,
yeah,
I like to bash other drivers like Hamilton, Alonso, all those other guys. You put Hamilton or Alonso in that McLaren, and they're winning this title, and it won't even be a question.
Yeah, Lando is just, as well as his driving being not as good as everyone thought it was. I think he's creating a lot of enemies because he has such a massive attitude problem.
Yes,
and he is just very childish. But I think that's probably a side effect of poor little rich boy syndrome.
Yeah.
Too. Yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
So tops and flops of the race. Tops, Leclerc, Sainz, Yeah, Leclerc, Sainz, Max, easy top 3, to be honest.
Yeah, I'd actually go. I'm trying to think of it. I'm trying to think if there's any left field picks I can get. Actually, I'll go for Leclerc. I'll go Max, and then I will go Lawson.
There's a thing, Lawson and Colapinto too that could be thrown in very easily.
Yeah, I think I voted Colapinto as a driver of the day actually, so I might go Leclerc, Colapinto, Lawson.
Yeah. Flops. Okay, Lewis, Tsunoda, and Lando.
Yeah, I'd go Lewis definitely, Tsunoda probably, and I'd go Zhou or Sauber just in general.
Yeah. So then in a week's time we've got Mexico City. We'll see if that's going to make it or break it for Checo again. Circuit's good. The races are touch and go. I mean, I don't remember anything about last year's race except what happened at the start, and the race the year before was utterly forgettable as well.
I genuinely, apart from that crash at the start of 2023, I don't remember a single, apart from what was it, 2016 or 17, where Lewis cut the corner at the start. I can't remember a single thing that's happened at Mexico City.
2016, he cut the corner. 17 was when him and Vettel both got punctures from Max in their title fight. 18, Lewis took, something happened in 18. Lewis took the title again at that one. Fuck knows. 19, don't remember.
Racing.
21, he was being chased down by Checo, and Checo couldn't pass him. And then it was just boring. The track is awesome. It looks great. It's a good. I mean, even though it's been emasculated by Herman Tilke, it's still a great circuit in terms of
but it's, because of the thin air, it's got the downforce you need of Monaco, but none of the slipstream effects because you have air that's thinner than an anorexic person.
Yeah, it's very touch and go with engine power because some engines don't respond well to the high temperature, to the high altitude, and others do.
I think I just need to bin off the race. I don't think that Mexico City the track is that good. I mean, if they brought the Peraltada back and put like loads of runoff there, then fair enough because it's a good selling point. But
yeah, I mean, the stadium bit is like, I get that it looks like a stadium, but you got rid of the banking, and you can't overtake in the stadium either. It's also, I like the fact that it's a circuit which it is a good design, and it's been in Formula One since the 1960s, so it has history. Attendance is great, but that's only because of Checo. Like once Checo goes, I think a lot of the incentive to still have it goes with him. Yeah. So maybe they would consider it. But at the same time, we shouldn't really be talking about removing races from the Americas when apparently every single Middle Eastern country needs to be on the calendar.
I mean, I would be happily trade Mexico for Argentina.
Yeah, go back to Buenos Aires.
But make sure it's the late layout of the circuit, not the shite one they used in the 90s.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it will, because Colapinto, like, he's got the whole of Latin America behind him now. He's got like 4 million followers on Instagram. His platform is huge for somebody who was just a kind of middling F2 driver until a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
He's taken over.
His personality as well. He is, I'd argue, one of the best personalities we've had in the last 10 years.
And also, we need things to keep going well for him, because otherwise then we'll see all those psychotic Canapino fans that have transferred over to him.
Yeah.
And that as well.
At least he's not like Canapino, which is good.
Yeah. But yeah, we'll see. Obviously, 5 races left. They'll all be good because we're at the crunch point where the title, it's not as much of a foregone conclusion as last year, but you never know. And they're all... Yeah, we've got some good circuits coming up, so that should be good fun.
Watch Perez take Max out for the win.
Yes, and now we're talking. You've been listening to the DRS Train podcast. We're on YouTube and Spotify, and you can find us on Instagram and X at the DRS Train podcast. Make sure to tune in for our next episode. Stay safe, and we'll see you all next time.
Bye.